And an optimal amount of stress will produce peak performance. Welcome to the True Health Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lonnie Bagwell, stress, inflammation, and functional health clinician.
And I'm your co-host, Brigitte Spurgeon, metabolism and nutrition expert.
This podcast is where we bring hope, truth, and inspiration for your holistic health journey.
Because the world needs the best version of you.
Hello, True Health family. Welcome to True Health Solutions podcast. And I am your host, Dr. Lonnie Bagwell, here with
Brigitte Spurgeon,
the one and only, out of Mexico right now. And as always, we start off every one of our episodes talking about how we're connected to the topic that we're going to be recording. And today, the topic is, as you already know, before you even clicked on it to listen or watch, is stress. And there's no shortage of experiences that we have, right, when it comes to stress, because we're human. We're just like everybody else. So I think we'll weave a little bit more of our experiences today into the podcast. That way we can kind of talk it out and maybe kind of develop some ideas in light of our own experiences. Sound good?
I'm excited. Let's do this.
Right on. Right on. So so as we get into this, and I think when we were talking about this beforehand, I think I've taught it's in the hundreds for sure workshops on stress, and or in all the workshops at some point I end up talking about some aspect of how stress impacts heart disease, cancer, diabetes, etc. But I always start off. I think the most powerful thing, in fact, when people ask me, I tell them, they say, "What's the most important thing that I need to know about stress?" And everybody wants to know right away. And it's why I get so excited about the stress workshop, because it's the time I can give the solution to that question, right? And the question is, what's the most important thing? And the answer is to even know what it is. And I think that is just the most important thing. And that's what we're going to tackle today on today's podcast. Is we're going to talk about what even is this thing called stress. And because as I perceive it, and after talking to thousands of patients and talking in front of thousands of people, is that I just call it the ominous unknown. It's just this thing called stress. It has no structure to it. Nobody has an idea what it really is. It's an emotion, maybe. It's kind of whatever you want to call it today, and it can be something totally different tomorrow. And it's something totally different for you and something totally different for me. And as long as we leave it like that, we have no power over it whatsoever. And it'll continue to be the thing that it's become, which is the underlying cause of all 21st century disease. It literally is the stressors in our life, whether it's physical, chemical, or emotional stress, are the underlying cause of all of the things that everybody wishes that they didn't have, but we've never taken the time to name it.
And really on the next two episodes, we're going to be talking about being the CEO of your life and of your stressors, and how you can, in a sense, delegate out to your stressors and nurture your stressors and support your stressors versus those control you and allowing them to wreck your life.
Yeah, amen. And that's and the name of the workshop that I teach is is the key to performance at life, right? Is understanding what the stress thing is and getting a hold on it. And so anyway, I think the first thing that we need to do is just go through and walk and talk through a little bit more about what stress is. And so very simply put, I guess stress can be broken into 4 different categories, right? So you can have different types of stress. And then I want to actually go through a little bit of science. This might not be the easiest thing to do on podcasts, but I want to walk through kind of the cascade of what's happening inside your body. And then we'll talk about how amazing it really is and how much of a miracle you are. That's really what today's episode's about. It's just about how much of a miracle you are, right, in context of how you're able to do and interact with life and experiences. And so, but there's 4 types of stress. There's 4 different kind of categories. There's good stress and bad stress, right? So, and most people don't realize, don't think a lot about good stress. Again, especially in the world today, the more negative stress and bad stress that we have, the more that's what we focus on. But we're going to actually talk about on today's podcast about the other side of it, really more so, which is that good stress, or what's called eustress, like EU stress. And then the other 2 categories are acute and chronic. So you can have good and bad, acute and chronic. And today's focus is more on good and acute stress. That's kind of what we want to focus on today. And so I have this bell curve that we looked at beforehand, that I don't think I can perfectly share right now, but that really just kind of gives you this idea of how stress plays this role in our day to day living, right? Whatever aspect of our life. And so the first thing I want to say is just simply that stress is required. Okay, it's required. If you want to get out of bed in the morning, there has to be a degree of a stress response to the day. So the light comes up, it shuts down the melatonin like we've talked about in past episodes, right? And other chemicals start to kick in so that we actually aren't totally lethargic laying in bed all day in the dark. They're actually going to get up and we're going to put our feet on the floor, right? So we're talking, this is good stress. This is motivating stress, right? Because the alternative is lame and bored and boring, right? We live a boring life, right? But as our feet get up on the floor and we start to take off on our day, now those chemicals are kicking in place, and now we're going to start to perform at life. And so to varying degrees, we're going to have, that healthy tension in our life. There's going to be, that's what we call motivation, right? We start to get focused, and the optimal amount of stress will produce peak performance. And I know that's something that you wanted to talk a little bit about, Bridget.
Yeah, I've really seen that in my life, and it's been really interesting how I have actually created it, how I have been intentional about stress for peak performance. And as I look over my life, I perform really well in stress. That's one of my superpowers. I do well with stress. I can navigate it well, and probably that comes from the dysfunctional side of stress of in my teenage years, really just having like so much stress, like uncontrolled stress around me, that I operated in this survival mode. But that survival mode still made me a high performer, which that in itself is a bit addicting, right? You get addicted to the rewards and the achievements and recognition and things like that. And so then I went into my adult life and living in America, where I no longer had the negative stressors, and so I went down to the bottom side of that bell curve, where then I didn't have the motivation, like the stimulation, like just those endorphins and those hormones weren't being released, and I was in a funk. I went towards the depression side, and so what did I do? I set big goals. Like I created my own stressors. And so I remember my first big goal was to do this ultra marathon in Africa. And so I imposed stress. I imposed even a sense of struggle and even a sense of misery into my life. It was self-induced. And then, years going on years, I went to use that to become a high performer, and the athletic performance spilled over into, business performance and relationship performance, and my health and like habit
Mm-hmm.
creation and things like that. So that was just very interesting now to look at that in hindsight and see how I imposed stress on myself for high performance.
I'm just kind of laughing on the inside right now because my story, like, again, being same thing. I mean, we're kind of cut from a similar cloth, growing up, maybe some stressful environment that we didn't ask for. But at the same time, it's like, how do I get out of this environment? How do I do something different than those people around me? And so you go through like that stage of like lethargy, where it's because you don't know what to do. You're younger and you're like, I don't know. And then all of a sudden you get a dream, you get a vision, you get a kind of a path, right? And it's like, and I just remember, with my family being so sick around me, I was like, I just made the decision, I'm going to be a doctor. Like, I want to be a doctor and help people, right? It's pretty noble, right? How am I going to do that? I can't afford college. No one in my family can afford college, like, so I better start, playing sports. That's a pathway. I better get good grades. I knew that, right? So I put tons of pressure on myself for good grades, right? And I'm going to say healthy pressure because we'll talk on the next episode. You can definitely get unhealthy with these things. And it's like I can't. I was like 13 years old. I was waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go lift weights. Like, why would a 13-year-old ever do that? and my mom would drop me off in the snow. It'd be 2 feet of snow outside the weight room, and I'd have to wait 30 minutes because she worked third shift, so she'd want to go home and sleep. And I'd wait in the snow, and like, who would do that? Somebody who is highly motivated. I set a goal. I want to go to college. I want to become a doctor. And athletics and academics were the only two ways that I was going to get there. And so that was it. So started getting good grades and started waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Um, and so I'm here today because of good stress, right? And that self-imposed good stress. And I was I had this picture of you, like I was thinking, like I've seen you here in the office, regular days, kind of, like kind of chilling and, doing day-to-day stuff or whatever. But then I think about the athlete that turns it on. Like maybe I just picture the starting line, although I imagine it happens before that. But, like when you're going into a race, because you were talking about a race, or for me, it was in the locker room. It's like, I show up to the locker room, it's hugs and high fives. It's no big deal. But if you took a picture of me, before going out on the football field or whatever, it's not, it looks like a bomb that's about to go off, right? Like, it's the intensity that just kind of wells up, over time, so that by the time you walk out on that field, you're literally like a different person. And my point in saying that is the physiological, it's a picture of the shift in physiology on the inside, right? So we self-induce, like I put myself in a different situation to get my physiology up, to get it to the physiology that's required to perform well, right? Getting into state, we might call it, but it's not just a
Yep.
mental state; it's a full physiological state. You want to comment on that just for a second?
It's exactly it. That paints a great picture of the difference between training and racing. So you will have better performance in a race due to the physiological effects of the cortisol and the adrenaline, and also because there's added pressure, so there's added stress on it because you have crowds cheering, you have a very specific goal, and you only have one time to achieve it, which is you're a little bit more laid back when you're on a training day going out for a run. Your pace is lower, your heart rate's low, just
Mm-hmm.
your environment is different. And race day, like that's when you're going to make your personal best for your times and your strength performance, things like that. And I think it's the same in life or in even work performance. Let's say you're practicing a speech, but then you have to give it on TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
And probably in that example, we can see that go two directions, because you can also be overwhelmed by the stress and the pressure of that. And I don't know, have you ever like blacked out on TV, like gone blank on TV? I know I have.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh yeah.
we can certainly shut down as well. And we see that hype, we see that in the movies, like golfers,
Mm-hmm.
or they crack under the pressure a little bit. So certainly you can go, there are two sides of that, but we
Absolutely.
definitely perform better with the pressure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I want to walk through and just go through. I just want to go through as briefly as I can what's really happening. I want to name stress. Like, I want to give it a name. I want to give it an understanding, because if you get it, then you could do something about it. Like, then it's something you realize that is far more manageable than anybody ever gave themselves permission to believe. And it doesn't have to be this ominous unknown, and it can be this amazingly good thing. Like, we don't want to just all throw all the whole concept of stress into the wastebasket. And so the first thing that typically happens, right, so you're sitting there getting ready for a race, or I'm sitting there getting ready to go on the football field. The first thing that happens is we start to, we're visualizing or whatever, we're thinking about the finish line, we're thinking about the battle that's about to happen, and cortisol and adrenaline start to go up, right? Well, when that cortisol and adrenaline goes up, it starts to draw our heart rate up, right? So now the heart rate's beating just a little bit quicker. And and let me take a step back, because I'm using a good example, but for people listening, maybe they can't relate to those exactly. But imagine someone breaks into your house. Okay. Imagine that there's a bear in the woods, on your hike, and you walk around the corner and you see a bear, right? You need this response that I'm talking about right now. You need the cortisol and the adrenaline and the heart rate to go up in order to push blood to the areas that you're going to need it in order to be able to perform, right? So and here's, and to make that point clear, You don't need blood in your digestive system worrying about digesting breakfast as a means of survival during your ultramarathon, right? If I'm going to war on the football field, I don't need to worry about, my body is not prioritizing digesting breakfast. It's putting blood to my extremities so I can grab and push and shove and whatever else might be going on out there, right? Same thing for for doing a performance, right, or giving a speech or something like that. Again, the body is amazingly, it's just innately intelligent, and it knows what to do here. So it'll actually increase your heart rate. It'll vasoconstrict, which pumps up the blood pressure, right? So now you're ready to perform, and your body's able to move things through your blood quicker as is necessary, whether that's energy that it needs to move through the blood, or maybe repair substances in case you really are going to war, right? And it doesn't know the difference between the football field and the boardroom, right? It only knows one amazing response to handle any of the stressors that are imposed. And then speaking of energy, your body will start to dump glucose into the bloodstream, right? Because that's our quick source of energy. And at the same time, it'll increase our blood fat levels or our blood lipid levels, because it's going to be ready in case if you run out of glucose, you have to still have energy because the bear is still running after you, right? The person is still in your house, or you're only halfway through the race, etc. You get it. And so, and then at the same time, if you're going to have blood sugar in the bloodstream and and you're not using it fast enough, then your body's tendency then would be to want to shuttle that sugar back into your cells, right? And by using insulins, but your body will actually put you into an induced state of insulin resistance in this acute stress state. And you're thinking, well, insulin resistance is bad, right? But no, in this instance, and in the acute phase here we're talking about right now, it's perfect, because you need that glucose in the bloodstream as much as possible and for as long as we can keep it there so you can have maximum performance. At the same level, again, your body is not prioritizing, doing higher math or remembering short term, things, and concentrating. And so, and this is really funny because whenever I do this workshop out in the community and I go through this slide, I'll say, have you ever had anybody where, they're really stressed out, or maybe it was you're really stressed out. And if someone came up and said, what's 2 + 2, you would literally look at them with crossed eyes and say, huh? You know what I mean? Like, because when you're in that stress state, you're not thinking about 2 + 2, right? That the body just loses the ability to perform some of those basic cognitive functions. And then at the same time, again, your body's not worried in that moment about, fighting a virus or a bacteria. So your immune system can actually, it might acutely ramp up, and then it starts to quickly right after that, it will start to ramp down, because immunity is not a priority if the threat is a bear running you down in the woods, right? And so it's incredible that in a split second, in literally a nanosecond, your body can go into this state to help you be in the best possible position to survive. And what we're talking about, this is literally the formula for survival. There is nothing better out there. I mean, again, you are a miracle, and this is the equation necessary to give you the best chance at surviving. Comments on that, Bridget?
Yeah, it just reminded me too, like, we obviously look at a lot of labs in the office, and we looking at lipid numbers, and when we see you're just talking about mobilizing the lipids in the blood under stressful environments, and when we see someone's LDL is up, or certain blood lipids up, or their blood sugar up, but it can be just up temporarily because there's been a temporary state of stress, and that's exactly what the body needed in that moment. But so just understanding that also about your labs and about your physiology.
That's so good. Yep, that's awesome. And again, that's what today's about, is that, like, if you understand what this stress thing is, you can harness it, right? You can use it for good. And then you learn how to massage your physiology, to recover properly so that you can come back at it again today. And the whole idea of getting your physiology right so you can come back at it again today, that's all about being resilient and being a high performer. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom, CEO, executive of the local power company, elite athlete, or, whatever, right? Or weekend hobbyist, it doesn't matter. We all want to perform well. And so whenever we're having the conversation around stress, we're always having a conversation around performance. And so the goal of today's podcast is to help people understand, like, get excited about this thing called stress, right? Get excited about, get excited about how amazing the body is to be able to handle acute stress, and how stress or good stress can actually help us achieve all of the things that God's put on our heart and our dreams. And everybody wants to end the day, well, right? Well, understanding this and embracing it and feeding this process is how we do that. Right. And so and that's why I love stress workshops the most, because it is truly foundational for optimal living. Right. If we want to see 10,000 families live extraordinary, we're going to have to embrace this.
Yeah, so it's identifying where you're at, right?
And so,
If you want to perform, if you need more performance, if you have to up your level of performance, it's, where are you at in that spectrum on that bell curve, and what do you need to put in place to get to the next level. And there are some situations where it just depends where you are on it. It's sometimes it's on the rest side of it, and then sometimes it's on, okay, I need to impose a structure, a goal, a new habit. I need to take myself to that next level.
amen. And that's what we want to help people do. Now, now I'm going to say not everybody, but most people listening are saying, this sounds awesome. This sounds amazing. But what about all the bad stuff we hear about stress? Like, what about all the, what happens when? Why am I on the other side? And that's what we've reserved to talk more about on our next episode, right? So we're going to get to that here shortly. But we want to talk about that next. So anything you want to say parting this episode before we jump into the other side, or what we call the dark side of stress?
Yeah, let me just add in a strategy that I talk about
Hmm.
a lot and something to be aware of. And it's the concept of hormesis, which is imposing
Good.
small amounts of stress on your body to improve the way your body adapts to stress and the way your body performs. And so an example would be, because we've really created a state of comfort in our world. Like, we think
Hmm.
about that just with temperature regulation, right? We have AC and we have heat in our buildings and our homes and our cars so we stay at the state of comfort. We wear shoes so our feet are not not hurt by the sticks or the rocks or the pavement, or the earth outside. And so we've created such a sense of comfort that it actually dulls our survival instincts and that strength that we have in our body. And so the theory is that if you impose the small amount, so maybe that is taking a cold shower to help your body adapt to that
Hmm.
stressor, or maybe that is fasting, like going without food, because that is a stressor on the body. So you're imposing it on a small amount that can be exposing yourself to dirt and to microbes. So you microdose it. So it teaches your body, your immune system, to adapt to it. So it's a way that we adapt, and we can also
Hmm.
expand our comfort zone when it comes to stressors. My husband says all the time, like, Bridget doesn't have a comfort zone. But part of that is because I grew up in large amounts of stress, and then I've put a lot of stressors into my life, where now I've expanded my capabilities, my skill sets, my immune system. Everything is just expanded because I've incorporated these small stressors into my life. So it's being aware of those and applying those regularly.
I love it. And I just think in a society that's becoming more and more avoidant as a first line of defense against things, you can see why we're becoming less and less resilient, right? But if we're willing to embrace, and I'm just remembering the Stoic saying, that I can't remember who it was because I don't study the Stoics, but I know it's one of them. And they said that the path is through. That nobody ever said the path is around, right? The path is through. So if you want to be better over here, then you have to get from directly as possible from point A to point B. The path is through. And so anyway, that's awesome. That's a great strategy. And really, and as we get into the next episode, all of the strategies that we would use to recover from the effects of chronic stress or bad stress, are going to be the same strategies used to, to continue to do those things to support a healthy acute response to stress, as well as that good stress, which is what we're focusing on now. So if that's something that anybody is interested in, you want to learn more strategies about how to overcome the effects of bad stress, but also fuel what we talked about today, which are the effects of good stress, then make sure you stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks for joining us today on True Health Solutions Podcast. Make sure that you click to subscribe. Also, go to our website, www.truehealthcharlotte.com, where you can download any resources related to today's show or any future shows. And lastly, if you search for True Health Center Group on Facebook, you'll be able to join our free health community. We look forward to seeing you there.